As to come in compact cars, like cheap customers, just leave. It appeared that everyone was smiling at the delightful sight of my mother and daughter. The kids, even though they were accommodating, when I made the reservation, I had hesitations about bringing my young child. But the reassuring looks from those around me finally made me feel at ease. Our appetizers were done, and the first main course was brought out. Seeing the elegant and lavish presentation, I instinctively took out my phone and snapped a photo. Immediately, a staff member approached me. It was a different person from the one who showed us to our table. He had a very displeased look, which made me feel a bit taken aback.
Excuse me, can you please not take photos?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought it would be nice to have a memory of this lovely moment.
This is what happens with poor folks. Why do we even have people like you in our establishment who let you in?
I clearly heard the muttered comment from the staff. Not to let it show, I looked down, not wanting to dampen my mother's spirits. But as I wrestled with my feelings, my daughter's crying brought me back to reality. She had dropped the bread she was eating on the floor. Her cries echoed in the quiet restaurant. Others started turning their attention to us, and in a panic, I tried to soothe her. But the more I rushed, the less effective I was. That's when the earlier rude staff member approached. "Ma'am, you're disturbing the other patrons with the noise." "I'm so sorry. I'll calm her down right away."
Oh, you shouldn't bring kids to places like this.
His sarcasm was evident, and this time my mother clearly heard him. Those words seemed to have reached my mother's ears this time.
Your attitude is what's really tarnishing the reputation of this place.
You do realize this isn't a place for children, right? I was just letting you know. And if you keep making a scene, should I call security?
But we realized that getting angry would only play into his hands. Taking a deep breath, I tried to remain calm. There beside me, I could hear my mother doing the same. "I truly apologize for the disturbance. My daughter has stopped crying. Can you give us a moment?" The staff member, arms crossed, stared at us, waiting for our next move. "Could you calm down? You're inconveniencing other guests." I distracted my daughter by giving her some bread from my plate. She immediately stopped crying and started eating happily. I let out a sigh of relief, and after sharing a glance with my mom, we decided to leave the restaurant. With my mom, I tried to apologize to the staff again before taking my seat, but the staff, looking even more irritated, confronted us again. "Do you even understand what I'm saying? I'm telling you to leave. This restaurant is too upscale for you." My daughter had calmed down, but the staff member continued, "She might cry again, right? And each time she does, you'll be disturbing everyone. This is supposed to be a fine dining restaurant. Butler had you ruining the experience for others." We hadn't even received half of our meal. We'd paid in advance and informed the restaurant about my daughter when we made the reservation. There shouldn't have been a problem. So what? This is exactly why poor people like you have such low standards. If we kept this up, the staff member threatened to call the manager. But a disgruntled staff member quickly walked off to the staff room. My mother and I were left speechless, wondering how someone could be so rude. Didn't they realize that their attitude was what was truly lowering the restaurant's standards? Despite this being a special celebration for my mother's 60th birthday, my mood was completely ruined. While it's true that I'd made a scene, I couldn't be too confrontational about it. Pondering our next move, my mother and I exchanged looks when the earlier staff member came back, now with a man who looked to be the manager. Upon seeing his face, I inadvertently let out a gasp. That's because the manager was none other than my middle school classmate, Daniel Thompson.
Is that you, Rebecca?
Do you know her?
Back in school, Daniel was always the earnest and cheerful type, quite reserved. He typically hung out in small groups, separate from the mixed group I was part of. I remembered him mainly because he once confessed to having feelings for me. At that time, I was seeing someone, so I had declined. But even after that, we talked a few times. I thought Daniel would have addressed the staff's behavior. Oh, Rebecca was my classmate. Daniel paused and looked at me with a mocking smile, sizing me up without any restraint. I was taken aback, blinking in disbelief. I had remembered him as a kind soul in middle school. It seemed he had changed a lot. How can you say that? I asked. I made a reservation and paid in advance. You gotta know how to flatter sometimes. What does that have to do with anything? Why does it matter? Isn't that your compact car outside? What if it is? When I replied with a hint of irritation, Daniel chuckled. I was genuinely shocked by Daniel's statement. Didn't he notice when you parked? No one else drives a compact car here. Everyone's driving Mercedes or something similar. Aren't you embarrassed to be so out of place? He looked at me with utter contempt. It seems the Daniel who once said he liked me was long gone. His change was so baffling. You get that the staff was right, so why don't you just leave? I began to get irritated by the treatment, as if they were lecturing us, as if we were making a fuss and refusing to leave the store. After all, we had made a reservation and paid. People, we had every right to dine there. Judging people based on appearances was something I could never imagine the old Daniel doing. But after all he said, there's no reason for my mom and me to stay. Reset might be good, but we don't want anything to do with a restaurant that has disrespectful staff and a manager. Daniel, you've changed. If you're going to be like this, we're leaving. When I said that, he seemed satisfied. I'm living the dream. I'm definitely better off than you now. Don't think you can just casually call me by my first name. It's a shame you've changed. When I said that, Daniel smirked. That's because you rejected me. Making fun of me even though you're not that pretty. Well, at least I'm happier now. Isn't it refreshing? He cheerfully said that and high-fived a nearby staff member. Both of them laughed. Apparently, Daniel still held a grudge about being rejected back in the day. Realizing that made his horrible attitude make sense to me. Kim, say whatever you want. I'm surely happier than some guy who still holds a grudge from so long ago. I have a wonderful daughter and a kind mother. Let's go, Mom. When I snapped back confidently, Daniel seemed to become even more pleased. He probably thinks I'm just being a sore loser. It ticks me off to no end, but shouting at him now would probably have no effect on him. I never imagined a classmate of mine would change so much. Today was supposed to end on such a happy note. You've made quite a mockery of my daughter. We don't want anything to do with a place like this. As you said, we'll be leaving, right, folks? What's this about the customer being God? Such an outdated way of thinking isn't popular nowadays. Recent Daniel's scream, which could be taken as a cry of anguish, echoed across the floor. Yet my mom didn't even flinch. You think caring for the customer is just a passing trend? Hearing this, Daniel choked back his words. He seemed intimidated by my mom's firm stance. However, rather defiantly, Daniel wouldn't accept my mother's viewpoint. We're the ones providing the food. We're more important than the customers. This is absurd. I'm important. If your daughter, Rebecca, hadn't rejected me, I wouldn't have treated you this way. That's right. Apologize to me right now, and maybe I'll even consider making Rebecca my woman. That would be a way out of your struggling life. Sounds good, doesn't it?
Daniel said that, looking at me.
I was utterly disgusted with him and sighed deeply. I'm sorry, but to be honest, I can't deal with you right now. As I told him off and lowered my head, chuckles arose from the surrounding crowd, and Daniel's face turned beet red. Although I thought my response was pretty obvious, Daniel, with his baffling confidence, seemed to have never expected another rejection. Why not? I have money, you know? You don't want to be looked down upon, right? And isn't it embarrassing to be a single mother? Us women like you probably can't remarry, so I'm offering to take you. It's none of your business. Just because you have money doesn't guarantee happiness. She brushed him off and his face turned even redder. I wondered if money was the reason behind Daniel's transformation. They say money can lead to one's downfall, but seeing it firsthand was a first for me. How dare a single mother like you talk back to me? Except by now, whatever Daniel said didn't resonate with me at all. In fact, after hearing my mother's words, Daniel's just seemed pitiful. Then a loud voice echoed from the back of the restaurant. Watching all of us in the store were startled and looked for the source. A middle-aged man appeared. Seeing him, Daniel instantly looked uneasy. I'm not done talking to you yet. Daniel, what on earth are you doing? Why is Dad here? I heard Mrs. Miller and her family were dining here, so I wanted to greet them. What's with all this commotion? It seemed that the man who appeared was Daniel's father. Actually, I hadn't seen him since middle school, but he seemed very stern and dignified. Earlier, one of the staff had muttered something about the boss. So this man must be the owner of the restaurant. I gave you the position of manager after hearing you lost your job, but the business is only declining. No, I see why. What did you see? Yes, I arrived a bit earlier. I peeked in when I heard the noise, and there you were, insulting Mrs. Miller's family. With all the arrogant things you were saying, don't you realize how wonderful a person Mrs. Miller is? the boss interrogated him, and Daniel was sweating bullets. What? This old hag is supposed to be someone special. Watch your mouth. Mrs. Miller helped fund the opening of this restaurant. This old lady has that kind of money. Of course, Mrs. Miller's husband owned a famous traditional candy store. And Mrs. Miller herself worked in the tough world of candy making. Even as a woman, she's experienced so much more in life than you. I wish I could boil down her wisdom and give you a taste. The owner said all this in a huff, then turned to face us. I'm so sorry for the trouble my foolish son has caused. Come on, apologize. Why should I? I'm the manager of this upscale restaurant. Didn't you trust my abilities enough to leave me in charge? This is my place. I make the rules. Enough of your arrogance. Oh, what have I done? Making someone like you the manager. So, what have I done making someone like you the manager? That's it. I'm so disappointed in you. At the lateness, you're never setting foot in this place again? Daniel's mouth dropped open in shock. In a panic, he began to apologize to his father, but the owner's decision was firm. You're apologizing to the wrong person. Please, I'm so sorry. I finally made it, and I don't want to lose it all over something like this. And you're still going on about that? You unbelievable guy. The owner shrugged in sheer disbelief, his face showing obvious shock. Of course, he would be feeling this way. No one would want to find out their child was so arrogant and disrespectful. If my daughter had been like that, I would have made the same decision as the owner. We all glared coldly at Daniel. The owner then began to share the story of how Daniel started working at the upscale restaurant. Apparently, Daniel used to work at a renowned hotel. But he racked up debts from gambling, and debt collectors caused chaos at the hotel, resulting in his firing. Lost and desperate, Daniel returned home to his father, who worked at an upscale restaurant, and begged for a job. At the time, Daniel's father had been offered a promotion to become the CEO of the company. So he decided to leave the upscale restaurant to his son and oversee several other restaurants. Restaurants in the same chain. At first, Daniel worked sincerely, and the owner had peace of mind. However, sales at Daniel's restaurant began to drop significantly. The owner had been trying to figure out the cause for a long time. I've received complaints about Daniel's terrible attitude from the staff, but there was no evidence. And I wanted to believe him since he's my son. Today, that hope turned to certainty. It's truly a shame. The owner looked at Daniel with a dejected expression. At Daniel, looking as if he'd been struck by lightning, began to apologize desperately.
Dad, please forgive me. I've been doing my best, haven't I?
What exactly should I say? We were classmates, remember? For old time's sake, after how you acted, you're really something. You truly are the worst.
No way! Seeing the disdain in my eyes, Daniel looked even more dejected. Both my mother and I were so taken aback that we just sighed. After that, Daniel lost his position as the manager of a high-end restaurant and was disowned by his father, leaving him without a home to return to. It was later revealed that Daniel had accumulated new debts he had kept hidden. Despite earning a good salary, he spent almost all of it on gambling, treating his staff poorly almost daily. However, he favored one particular staff member who always gave us a hard time. That's because this staff member was Daniel's junior from his college days. It seems hiring him was also on Daniel's orders. Given this junior's problematic work attitude, it seems he was kicked out of the restaurant along with Daniel. Is having lost everything, Daniel delved even deeper into gambling to drown his sorrows. Now he seems to be struggling to pay off his debts. He's really not a good person at all. My mother's 60th birthday celebration got ruined, so we gathered all the people who were at the restaurant that day and later rented a room in a hotel for a party. That hotel was owned by Daniel's father, who generously let us use a room for free as an apology. I made many friends there, and I realized just how much people loved my mother. Everyone there had met her when she worked as a traditional sweet maker, coming to her shop to buy sweets as gifts. The fact that she still has connections to this day is probably because she's such a charming person. I too want to emulate my mother and become a mother my daughter looks up to.